For topic 2, we're going to go ahead and learn how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So we understand what step needs to be taken to force a trinomial to be a perfect square trinomial. Now we're going to do the whole kit and caboodle. We're going to do the whole solving method. The condition here is that a, the coefficient of the square term, is 1. In order to complete the square, a has to be 1. So in these two examples, a is already 1. In the next video, we'll look at what terrible thing is going to happen when a is not 1. And it's not that terrible. It just makes it maybe a little bit messier. Okay. So here what we have to do is we have to rewrite ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 as ax squared plus bx equals negative c. So regardless of whether c is positive or negative, move it to the other side of the equation. That's going to leave us this non-perfect square situation where we have a binomial, but we know how to force it to be a perfect square trinomial. And then that's going to equal some constant. Okay, we then complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides. Now we know if we add it to the side that contains the two variable terms, we get a perfect square trinomial, which is great, but we have to maintain balance. So whatever we add or subtract to one side, we have to add or subtract to the other side. So we do need to add b over 2 squared to both sides of the equation. We need to factor the perfect square trinomial side and then apply the square root property. Okay, so example 2 says solve by completing the square. So let's dive in. Okay, for example A, it says x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. We want to get the two terms that contain the variables alone. We want the constant separated from that. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And I'm going to leave a little space when I do this. Hopefully you'll see in just a second what I mean. So I'm going to take my x squared plus 2x plus, and then I'm going to leave some space. And then 0 plus 8 on the right is 8, and I'm going to leave a little space. I'm going to leave that space for the actual completing the square part, okay? Now, to complete the square, we have to take b over 2 and square it. Well, you have to ask yourself, what is b? B is the coefficient of plain old x. Well, b in this case is 2. So I want to take 2 divided by 2 and square it. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So I need to add 1 to both sides. Okay? Now, because I have added this very specific value to the left, that has forced this side right here to be a perfect square trinomial. Okay, and it factors beautifully. What we love about the perfect square trinomial is how it factors. So what you do is you take the square root of the first term. So the square root of x squared is just x. And then we take the square root of what we just added. The square root of 1 is 1. And then this sign right here tells us what sign we need in our factored form. So we need to go plus here. And then that's going to equal 8 plus 1, which is just 9. And if you go back to the previous worksheet, this is set up perfectly for the square root property. We have the variable isolated in a single squared term equaling a constant. So we want to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x plus 1 squared equals plus or minus. Remember that from the square root property? So we want plus or minus the square root of 9. Well, the square root of x plus 1 squared, the square root and the exponent of 2 just unravel each other. So we're left with just x plus 1 equals plus or minus 3. Square root of 9 is just 3. And at this point, I want to go ahead and isolate my x. So I need to subtract 1 from each side. Well, 1 minus 1 is 0, leaving me with just my x. And then on the right, when I subtract that 1, this is my preference. I like to put the 1 in front of the plus or minus. And then I need to simplify. So we're not done quite yet. X is equal to negative 1 minus 3, and x is equal to negative 1 plus 3. So you need to go ahead and figure out that plus minus situation. Well, negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4, and negative 1 plus 3 is 2. So we would say the solutions to this quadratic are negative 4 and 2. And I will say this original quadratic you could have done easier by factoring, okay? But I used a very easy example specifically so you could sort of see how completing the square worked first, okay? Let's look at part B. So for part B, we have x squared minus 8x plus 9 equals 0. We want to get the two variable terms on one side of the equation, the constant on the other. So I'm going to subtract 9. That's going to leave me with x squared minus 8x plus, where I complete the square, equals negative 9 plus, leave a spot to complete the square. Okay? Now we need to take b over 2 and square it. Well, b is -8 divided by 2 squared. So that's -4 squared, or 16. So I want to add 16 to both sides of the equation. Remember, you can't just add it to the left to complete the square. You also have to add it to the right to maintain balance. Okay? So I'm going to go plus 16, plus 16. Now the left, we can say confidently, is a perfect square trinomial. It factors beautifully. It's always going to factor in this format. We take the square root of the first term. So the square root of x squared is just x. We take the square root of the last term, the thing we just added. Well, the square root of 16 is 4. And then this sign right here tells me what this sign down here is. So this factors as x minus 4 squared. And then on the right-hand side, just simplify it. So -9 plus 16 is what? 7? So we get 7. Okay? Now, at this point, we are primed and ready to go for the square root property. We have the variable isolated in a single term squared equaling a constant. Let's go ahead and take the square root of each side. So the square root of x minus 4 squared, and then plus or minus the square root of 7. Okay? Well, the square root of x minus 4 squared is just x minus 4. And then the square root of 7 is just the square root of 7. So I'm going to leave this plus or minus the square root of 7. Now, I do want to get the x alone. So my issue is this plus 4, or this minus 4 rather. So I need to add 4 to both sides. Well, -4 plus 4 is 0, leaving you just the x. And then the plus 4, the 4 that I added to both sides, I want to stuff it in front of the plus or minus. So I'm going to write this as 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. And that actually doesn't simplify any further. So at this point, you are done. We would say our solutions are 4 minus the square root of 7 and 4 plus the square root of 7. And that's it. So that is completing the square. I don't think it's the most horrendous thing you've ever seen. You need to understand what a perfect square trinomial is. You need to understand how to force a binomial to be a perfect square trinomial, and you need to understand the square root property, okay? But then after that, it's really not so bad. So make sure you practice these basic examples. In the next video, we're going to talk about what happens when the squared term does not have a coefficient of 1. There's like an extra layer to those problems.